What does it look like to love one another in our deeply divided culture? And what's the love language that matters most? That's coming up. Stick with us. Welcome to this week's episode of Faith and Culture. I'm your host, Tré Goins-Phillips, and we're joined by Dr. Gary Chapman, of course, the author of The 5 Love Languages. Dr. Chapman, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Tré, and it's good to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you here with us. And you have a brand new book, which is kind of revisiting, expanding on the 5 love languages. It's called The Love Language That Matters Most: How to Personalize Love so They Really Feel It. So tell us why you decided to revisit this now, some 30 years later, with a follow-up book.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 questions that people have asked me through the years who have read the original book. And as you know, it's sold over 20 million copies. But here are the 2 questions people have asked me. They say, in your original book, you mentioned that there are dialects within each of these languages, but you don't tell us what they are. And then they also say, and you also mentioned that personality, makes a difference, but you don't discuss that very much. And so I thought, okay, after all these years, I'm going to address those 2 issues. And I teamed up with Les and Leslie Parrott. You may know them. They live in Seattle, and he's a psychologist. She's a Christian marriage and family counselor. And they are really, really great on this kind of thing. And first of all, we did a new assessment. It's called the Premier Assessment, where it will tell you not only your primary language and what percentage the others are, but it will tell you the dialects within all these languages and show you which 1 or 2 are really most important to you within that language. And then also it will give you your personality and show you how personality interfaces with that. So we started out with that assessment, and a lot of people have taken that assessment. You have to pay for this one. The other one was free, the little free 165 million people have taken the free quiz.
Just a few people have taken it, right?
But I'm really excited about this new assessment. It's really helping people. And then this book goes along with that. And so you have the book and the online assessment, so which really helps you make it personal. So those are the key issues here. But we're also emphasizing some other things in this new book, and that is curiosity, for example, learning how to ask questions and stimulate conversation so that you can get to know another person rather than just assuming that you know each other. So we think this book's going to be really, really helpful.
Something that I noticed back when I was dating was that often, I don't know if it's generational or what, but it's like people were not really that good at engaging in conversation and asking questions of each other. And talk about some of that. What has been your experience as a counselor in dealing with couples who they say, I try to engage in conversation, but he or she just, we don't really, conversation doesn't flow between us.
Yeah. Well, I think it's true. And a part of it has to do with technology. I think that some people are just so absorbed in technology, they don't learn how to ask questions and have conversations. I have found this. Young people who grow up in home or homeschooled tend to be far more conversational than teenagers that are in public school. I don't know what the dynamic on that is, but I do think conversations is difficult for a lot of people in our culture, especially the younger generations, because they didn't learn how to have conversations at home. Everybody was either, earlier watching on TV, and now they're on their screen and all that's available there, and they're not having conversations in the home. And that's why I really encourage parents, man, let's have a place where we talk as a family.
Right.
And sometimes say you can do this at dinner time or whatever time works for the family. But tell me what happened in your life today that was really exciting, or tell me something today that really frustrated you. And if they learn to have conversations at home, then they can have conversations in other places.
Yeah.
But it's a skill. If you didn't learn it at home, it's a skill to be learned. And I think that's why a lot of younger, especially younger folks, have to be told, have to be encouraged. Let's learn how to have conversations. Let's learn how to ask questions and show curiosity because it communicates to the other person. I see you as an important person. I see you as somebody I'd like to get to know, you know. But you won't get to know someone without conversations.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned now familial relationships as well as obviously romantic relationships and friendships as well. So I think a misnomer that people often have is that the five love languages, the assessment, the books, that's just if you're in a dating relationship and you're heading toward marriage. But these principles apply to all relationships. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been interesting through the years how we've expanded the whole idea. You know, we started off with the five love languages of children for parents, so they can learn the primary language of the child. But don't hear me saying you only speak the primary language of a child. You give heavy doses of the primary, but you also speak the other four. We would like the child to grow up knowing how to receive love in all five and learn how to give love in all five. That's the healthiest adult. And then following that, we did the five love language of teenagers because parents would say to me, well, Gary, we read the book on children. It was so helpful, but now they're teenagers. It doesn't seem to be working. Does their love language change? And I'm saying in that book, among other things, I don't think the love language changes, but you have to learn new dialects because what you've been doing, they consider childish. So, you know, when they were 8 years old and playing a sport, you could go out there on the ball field. If physical touch is their language, give them a big old hug in front of everybody. Don't try that with your teenager. You go out there, they go, no, don't do that. You know? and then single adults, you know, they said, yeah, I think you wrote that first book mainly for couples, but how about us? So I wrote the five love languages of singles, how this applies with your parents, with your siblings, your roommates, you know, college roommates and so forth. And then we've done specialties in terms of how it works in a blended family, because the dynamics emotionally are different in a blended family, how it works with special needs children.
Yeah.
And I wrote these books with people who have been in those areas. And then we wrote one on how it applies at work relationships. It's called the five languages of appreciation in the workplace. Work relationships are different. So we use the word appreciation rather than love, but it's the same basic need that I'm seen as a person. I'm valued as a person. I'm not just a cog in a machine here. Yeah, as you said, it applies in all human relationships. That is close relationships. You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, talk about how personality differences change how we perceive giving and receiving the five love languages.
Yeah. Well, let's just take, for example, introvert and extrovert, which is just one of the categories of personalities. I'll just give you a story first. This lady, her husband was 30 years old, had his 30th birthday. So she said, I want to take you out and surprise you for dinner. So he's thinking that she's going to take him to a really nice restaurant because he's an introvert and he's just looking forward to having some time just with her. Well, she drives. And she pulls up in front of the house of a friend of theirs. He said, what are we doing here? She said, well, Mary wanted us to stop by. He opens the door. They open the door. 30 people are there for his birthday party. He is shocked. And he's nice about it. He enjoys it. The evening. He interfaces with people, you know. But in his heart of heart, he would much have preferred just the two of them going out to a nice restaurant because he's an introvert. He's not an extrovert. And another way of application of that would be, let's say words of affirmation is a person's love language. But if they're an introvert and you give them words of affirmation in front of a bunch of people, oh man, that's hard for them. They're just sitting there. Just wish you'd stop.
Just waiting for it to be over. Right?
Yeah. Just putting up with it. And the person thinks they're doing a wonderful thing, because that's their language, words of affirmation. I'm going to give it. No, they much would prefer you give it to them. you know. So that's true in every relationship. We have to take into account the personality of the person, because if a personality, for example, is very cautious. One person's very cautious about things. They want to hear a lot, know what they're doing before they do it. The other's very curious, so they just do things on the spur of the moment. For example, a guy who knows his wife is quality time. He says on Friday night, "Honey, how about tomorrow morning we get up early and you and I go on a hike up in the mountains and spend the morning together?" And she says, "Honey, I've got Saturday already planned." He said, "Oh, you can push those back to next Saturday." You see, he thinks he's doing something really wonderful for her because he's going to spend the whole morning with her. But he did it on the spur of the moment. She's a planned kind of person. She fine, let's plan it 3 weeks out so I can keep my Saturday, So she feels pressured, by him rather than feeling excited about what he just came up with. So personality has a tremendous impact, and that we deal with that in the book and go through that with all the different personalities and so forth. So I think couples are going to find that part of the new book really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to fit in a quick break, everybody, but stick with us. We'll be right back with more Faith and Culture and Dr. Gary Chapman. Welcome back to Faith and Culture. We're joined by Dr. Gary Chapman. And Gary, one of the things that I found fascinating, and of course, reading the 5 love languages and reading some of the new book, and my wife and I have taken the assessment, is just the different ways that we can see the Lord through all of these different love languages, these 5 love languages. So when you first discovered them and, of course, put them into a book for people like us to kind of go through, tell us what it revealed to you maybe about the character of God.
Well, I started reflecting sometime after I published that original book, reflecting on the love of God, because people would ask me, what is God's love language? And I began reflecting on that, and I realized, just going through the Bible, God speaks all 5 languages fluently. And so I talk about how people are drawn to Christ. If you look at conversion experiences, for example, often there's a parallel between their love language. Some of them, physical touch people, often have a dramatic physical aspect of their conversion. Their bodies start shaking. They start weeping. They feel God's presence. Not everybody has that kind of experience. So, understanding that God speaks all 5. He loves you, and He communicates all 5 of them. But you typically respond more deeply to His love as it comes through your love language. For example, my language is words of affirmation. Man, I experience the love of God when I read the Bible, all these things about what God's doing. I'm with you. I'm going to help you. All those things communicate love to me.
Yeah, well, talk too about as we're learning our love languages, learning how we receive love and how we give love. Talk about what it is like to get better at these things and to be persistent and to ultimately, hopefully, at some point, kind of master the ability to give your wife or your husband love the way they need to receive it.
Yeah, well, we emphasize in this new book, The Love Language That Matters Most, that it's a process, and you don't have to be perfect. And we're not emphasizing perfect. We're emphasizing taking positive steps, because we learn how to speak another person's language step by step by step. But this means we have to, first of all, discover what their primary love language is. And of course, the new book helps you also discover what their particular dialect of that language. Like in words of affirmation, for example, there's encouragement, words of encouragement. Honey, you're really good at that. I think you ought to because you're really good at that. Just encouraging words. And then there's words that talk about compliments. One of the things I like about you is your smile. It's just looking for positive things, or you look nice in that outfit, just compliments. And then there's words of appreciation. Honey, I really appreciate the fact that you take the trash out every night. I don't think I've told you that, but I really appreciate that. And so the dialects, just a little different nuance in those three, And if you learn the primary language, you learn the nuances, that is the dialects of that language, then it's a learning thing. Because I had a guy say to me, he said, Dr. Chapman, her language is words of affirmation. I don't know how to do that. I never received positive words growing up. Yeah, all I remember is I was told that I was lazy and I was never going to amount to anything. And I don't know how to say positive words. And I said, well, you are where you are. We can't change our history. But here's the good news. You can learn to speak this language as an adult. It's a matter of attitude. If you realize that this is what makes my spouse feel loved, then you say to God, I want to be your agent for loving them. And so I'm asking you to help me. And God will help you learn how to speak that language, though you've never spoken it growing up. It was never spoken to you growing up. And so, I just wrote out, I said, can you tell me 3 things that your wife is good at? He said, well, she's a good cook, and she's a good school teacher, and she's a good mother. I wrote those 3 words down, and out beside each one of them, I wrote 3 sentences. And something like on the cooking, honey, I haven't told you this, but I really appreciate all the meals you fix. You're a good cook. I said, now you take these home and you get in a room twice a day and read these words out loud so you hear yourself saying them. And when you come back next week, I want you to be able to say them to me without looking at the script. Mm-hmm. So he came back and said them. I said, okay, now here's your assignment. The next 3 weeks, you give her one of these each week. I don't care what order. I don't care what time of day. You just give her one of these each week. And he said, man, I hope I can do this. I said, well, you said them to me. If you can say them to me, you can say them to her. He did. He came back and I said, well, how'd she respond? He said, well, on the 3rd week, she said to me, what's going on with you? I've never heard you give me so many compliments. I said, what did you say? He said, I just said, honey, we read that book and we took that quiz and your language is words of affirmation. And I'm just trying to learn how to put my love into words because I love you. She said, oh, that's so sweet. So, yes, it's a process, but we can learn to speak the language and we can learn to speak it in not only the language, but the dialect that's really important to our spouse.
What advice would you give to people watching our conversation about just taking that first step of humbly saying, you know what, I realize we're not really that good at this, but I want to get better at it?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to realize none of us are perfect. And when we hurt the other person and then we just, we go silent. Whereas if we've hurt the other person, it calls for an apology. And to say, honey, I lost my temper. I yelled at you. And I know that your love language is words of affirmation. So I know that hurts you very, very deeply. And I want you to know I'm sorry. And I don't want to do that again. I want to ask God to help me not to do that again. I want to learn how to control my behavior, and I want to ask you to forgive me. Well, now she has the response of forgiveness. That's the Christian response, because we forgive others the way God forgives us. And we confess to God, he forgives us. And so now that barrier is gone.
Yeah.
And now, so every time we fail, we need to offer an apology rather than just thinking, well, they'll get over it or, no. Every time we hurt the other person, we put an emotional barrier between us, like a block in a wall. And if we don't deal with it, we just build a wall between us. So apology is very, very important. That's why I wrote a book called The 5 Apology Languages, because we have different ideas on what a sincere apology is. But at any rate, I think it's a learning process. And that's why we really emphasize this in the new book. We're not condemning anybody. We're just saying, look, you are where you are. Let's just start there and let's learn how to have the kind of marriage you really wanted to have when you got married. Loving, supportive, caring of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a little bit more time with Dr. Gary Chapman, but we're going to fit in another quick break. Everybody stick with us. We'll be right back with more Faith and Culture. Welcome back to Faith and Culture. We have just a few more minutes left with Dr. Gary Chapman. Gary, you've mentioned a few times that you've now rolled out a brand new assessment of the 5 love languages that goes along with the new book, The Love Language That Matters Most. So tell us a little bit about how this new assessment differs from the past assessment.
Well, it gives you lots more information. The original a little quiz told you what your primary language was, your secondary love language, and the one that maybe was least important to you. This one gives you actual percentages on each one of those. And it also helps you identify not only the primary love language, your primary love language, but the dialect in that language that's most important to you. And then it also gives you your basic personality pattern and how that interfaces with speaking the love language. So if the spouse, if each of you take that premium quiz, and you can do that at 5lovelanguages.com, the number 5lovelanguages.com/quiz, and go down to the premium quiz. Each of you take it, man, you've got real insight as you sit down and walk through that and come to realize, well, I didn't realize that about you, honey, that's your dialect. This is going to be very helpful. Man, you take that as you read through this new book, the one that matters, the love language that matters most. And what we're saying in that book, the love language that matters most is the love language of the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, for people, I know you mentioned the website a few minutes ago, but again, for people who want to pick up a copy of The Love Language That Matters Most, or they want to take the assessment, where can they go?
Well, of course, they can get the book on Amazon, or they can go to 5lovelanguages.com, the number 5lovelanguages.com, and check on either assessment, or you can also pick on the resources, and you'll see all of my books at that website.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Gary Chapman, it was a pleasure having you here with us on CBN News. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was great being with you.
That is all the time we have for this week's episode of Faith and Culture. If you want more from our conversation with Dr. Gary Chapman, check out the podcast version of this episode wherever you get your podcasts. And also head on over to cbnnews.com so you can get all the news from a Christian perspective. Thank you so much for being here, and God bless you.